Hi, everyone. I thought I would share a yoga practice with you today. This practice is meant to be safe for anyone with any curve type, any scoliosis curve type. It's also safe for those of you that have a spinal fusion. And it is also safe for people who have other back conditions like osteoporosis or even a herniated disc. Everything we'll be doing today is going to be in a neutral spine, which means we're not moving anything from our shoulders to our hips the whole time. Of course, even though these movements are safe, they might not feel easy. So you're welcome to adjust and modify anything that you need to. And it's always best to get your doctor's approval before exercising. What I have with me today is my yoga mat, a chair. You could use a dining room chair at home if you want to, or something else, even an ottoman. I've got 2 yoga blocks, a yoga strap. You could always use a piece of rope or something at home if you needed to. Some washcloths. This will be used to pad my concavity when I'm on my back. And then depending on your curve or your own unique spinal anatomy, you might want to have a hand towel. This can go across the lumbar spine when we're on our backs. And you might want to have a blanket nearby. So I start all of my classes in a rest position. And this is to help calm down the nervous system before we start asking our bodies to move perhaps differently than what they're used to. So you're going to have all of your supplies handy within reach. And then we're going to find our way onto our backs. The safest way to do that is actually through the side body. So you're going to sit really close to the surface that you plan to have your legs on. Going to slide down onto your side and then roll onto your back from there. Okay, once you're here, you can take a moment, fidget around, make sure that you feel like you are aligned, shoulders and hips. And then take a moment and just do a check-in here. We're going to start at our head. So let your head be neutral and see if your gaze is straight up towards the sky. And if it's not, if perhaps your head is tipped back, like you're looking behind you, if that's you, you're going to bring some head support in. So we're always looking for a neutral spine position here. So we don't want to bring any extra head support in that we don't actually need. For example, if I were to bring this a little higher up, you can see that my chin is now tucked towards my chest. And if I were to stand upright and have this same neck and head position, I'd pretty much be looking at the ground. So neutral spine is a straight line from your ear to your shoulder to your hips. So again, gaze should be straight towards the sky. Use your head support if you need it. If you don't truly need it, then don't use it. And then we're going to check in with everything from our shoulders to our pelvis. So just take a moment and notice the places in your body that easily touch the ground. And notice anywhere that's not touching the ground. So for my scoliosis friends, you might not have your concavity touching the ground quite so much. And if that's the case, you're going to bring a little bit of padding into the concave area. Just tuck that on in there. And when we bring padding into our concavity, we're not trying to build that space up towards the sky. We're just trying to give those muscles that often don't have any proprioceptive feedback something to feel. So a lot of times your concavity doesn't touch anything. It might not rest back against a chair. It might not touch the ground when you're laying down. And those muscles just kind of go to sleep because they don't feel anything. So we're bringing some padding in, not to build the concavity up higher, but just to give it a little bit of feedback. If you tend to have a rounded upper back and you see that your shoulders are lifted away from the ground, then you can give yourself padding under your shoulders as well. And some of us might have space the whole way across the lumbar spine. In that case, you'll bring your hand towel in, like I mentioned earlier. You're going to put it under your body. So you would lift up, bring your hand towel in, and then place it under your low back. So that would be above your butt and below your ribs. So you just really pad everything that's not easily touching the ground. The name of the game here for these next few moments is to support your body as well as you possibly can. All right. Once you have everything supported, you're going to bring your legs up onto whatever support you're using here. And it's perfectly okay for there to be an angle from the knees to the hips. And then you might also bring your yoga strap in. We're going to hook it around our thighs. And this isn't meant to glue the thighs together. You can have space still between your legs, but it is meant to stop how far your legs can roll open. I'm going to tighten that up a little bit. Again, there's space between my knees here, but my legs can't go anywhere. They can't flop open now. Can let your arms rest at the sides if that feels okay. Turning the palms up might encourage your shoulders to sink back towards the floor a little. And then you're going to close your eyes or find a soft gaze and simply tune in to your breath. So take a moment and notice how your breath is arriving here right now. Get a feel for the pace of your breath and the depth. Maybe some textures or temperatures are present in your breath. And start to tune in and notice where movement happens as you breathe. So you might feel more movement in your belly. You might feel more movement in your upper chest or around your low ribs. Just notice what's happening for a moment. And then we're going to invite our breath to grow a little bit bigger and a little bit slower. We'll take a little bit more time with each breath in. Let the exhale also start to take a little bit more time. And then again, tune in and notice movement. See if you can sense the ribs expanding a little more with each breath. See if you can let your belly rise and fall with each breath. Sometimes I tell my students to let their breath live in 360 degrees. It's like a balloon filling in all directions. And then if you have scoliosis, you're going to draw to mind one of your concavities. So the concavity is the space that doesn't touch the ground quite as easily. It's the space that might have some washcloth under it at the moment. You're going to direct your breath into the concavity as if you could breathe over to that side of your body a little more fully. You're going to breathe the concavity out to the side and also down towards the floor, like you're breathing down into your washcloth. And then when you exhale, you're going to breathe your curve towards your midline. And imagine that you could actually lift it up away from the floor a little bit. These are such tiny movements, though. Breathing in, curve is coming out to the side and down towards the ground. Exhale, curve coming towards the midline and up and away from the floor. I think I might have misspoke that last breath. So breathing in, concavity out to the side and down towards the ground. Breathing out, curve towards the midline, up and away from the floor. I'm going to try a few more times. And if you have more than one concavity, just pick one to work with. Know that if this is your first time trying to breathe into a particular part in your body, it can be a little tough to do, a little tricky to do at first. And that's okay. Just give yourself permission to be with it however it's landing for you today. Breathing the concavity out to the side down towards the floor. And then breathing the curve towards your midline and up and away from the floor. Maybe 1 or 2 more breaths in that way. Using your breath to create a little bit more space and openness in the concavity. Allowing your spine to lengthen with each breath. And even if you have a spinal fusion, ribs can still move. So we can still work with our breath. Go ahead and allow that way of breathing to fade away. Take a moment, tune in with any sensations in your body. But just notice the places that draw your attention right away. There might be some talkative areas here today. And then take a moment and check in with the quieter spaces in your body. As you're doing your check-in here, notice if there's anywhere that wants some extra attention today. And extra attention might be being a little bit more careful or more cautious. And then we'll have another nice, full, big breath here. And then if you have a strap on your thighs, we're going to take it off. So we'll bring our legs a little closer in. I like to use buckle straps because they're easier to get in and out of, but you might have yours tied on. You might need to take a moment to sort that out. And then we're going to keep one leg on our chair, and we're going to take our strap around the sole of the other foot, and we'll stretch that leg up overhead. So depending on how flexible you are here, your leg might be lower down. You might even need to get your chair out of the way. We're going to check in here with our low back. So if you don't have the hip mobility to bring your leg up, you might be borrowing that movement from the low back. You might be sort of curving your low back down towards the ground. And we don't want to do that. So low back is still neutral. Unless you have a hand towel under your body, there might be some space there. That's okay. Just bring our leg up, and we're always going to stay in ranges of motion that feel safe and happy and comfortable. So if you have tight hamstrings, you might need to bend the knee a little bit. You might need to let your leg come closer down towards the ground. Find a spot that feels comfortable and safe for you to stay. And then we're going to start to bring a little bit of a side to side sway into this top leg. And while we do, we're going to focus on keeping our pelvis super steady. So when I work with clients in my back care program, we spend a lot of attention paying really close and detailed attention to what's moving. Is it our back? Is it our hip? Is it our shoulders? And just really start to differentiate spine movement versus hip movement, or spine movement versus shoulder movement. So as you're swaying side to side here, see if you can keep your pelvis steady, because if you don't, then you're coming into a spinal twist. We'll go maybe just a few more moments here on this side. And then the next time that you find your way back up to center, we'll go ahead and pause. You can scoot your strap off of that foot. We'll put it back onto our support, and then bring the other leg in and loop your strap around your foot, and we'll take our leg up. And again, you're going to do your check-in here. So this side might feel a little different. Quite often we have differences between the two sides of our body. So again, find the height from the ground that works. Have a knee bend if you need it. Check in with your low back again. Make sure your back isn't squished to the floor. And then we're going to bring that side to side sway in. Again, keeping the pelvis steady, letting just the leg move. And we don't have any end goal here, so the movement can be as small as it needs to be. Keep tuning in, noticing sensations. Notice if you're breathing. If you started to hold your breath, that's a great sign that you need to back away. And you might find some sort of interesting areas here through your body. So if you land somewhere that has a little more sensation, you maybe want to pause there for a moment or not. It's always your choice. And just another moment or so here. And then when you're ready, go ahead and come on back to center again. Take your strap away and we'll again let our leg land. All right, we're going to set our strap aside for a moment. We're going to bring our attention up to our shoulders now. We're going to take our arms straight up towards the sky and then back behind us any amount. And then we're going to draw our arms straight up towards the sky again. And once again, back behind us any amount. Okay, and then really tune in here and notice what's happening in your back. So again, if you don't have the shoulder mobility to get your arms all the way by your ears, there's a good chance you're trying to borrow that mobility from the ribs. So you might find that you get to a spot that feels a little sticky, and then the ribs want to pop up away from the ground. So if you're finding that happening, if you're finding that the ribs want to come away from the floor, one of two things. Maybe just make the movement smaller. So you're sticking with that range of motion that your shoulders have. Or maybe an and, see if you can find a little bit of core engagement. So I like to think about my ribs staying connected to the front of my hips. Finding a little bit of engagement there. And that does not mean smushing your back to the floor. See if you can keep the ribs steady and let the arms move. And you might find that the two arms don't move quite the same. Again, this is a really common scenario when we have scoliosis. Our two sides aren't the same. One side's probably a curve and one side's probably a concavity. And that affects the whole body, including the shoulders. All right, this next time we bring our arms up towards the sky, we're gonna go ahead and let our hands come on down. Then we're gonna get our legs off of our chair here. So if you have enough space for your feet to just land and not be bothered by your chair, we're going to go with that. If you need to get your chair out of the way, the safest way for you to get there is again through your side. So I'll just show you what that looks like. Come up. We'll bring one arm up overhead. Going to roll to that side. Use your arms for support and then come on upright. Okay, so if you need to get your chair out of the way, go right ahead. I'm going to scooch mine out of the way now that I'm upright. And then we're going to find our way to our backs again. So if you didn't need to come up, you're welcome to just still be on your ground, on the ground. Slide to the side, roll onto your back. If you didn't end up right on your padding, go ahead and get it on in there again. All right, so we're going to bend our knees, let your feet be about hip width apart. And we're going to let our hands rest on our belly for a moment. Check in and notice any movement that's happening as you breathe. And then the next time that you exhale, we're going to pretend we're blowing out a great big giant birthday cake. So many candles. So take a big breath in. Keep blowing and blowing like there's one tricky candle that doesn't want to go out. Poke around your belly for a moment. What happened there? And then relax. Take a big breath in. Do it again. Birthday candles. And poke around your belly. So hopefully what you're finding is a little bit of core engagement here. You might feel some muscles that are hard underneath your fingertips if you're poking around. Hopefully also what you're finding is that your low back is still neutral. So if you've been taught that in order to engage your core, you need to smush your back from the floor to the floor, try not to do that. Try to let the pelvis be neutral, try to let the low back be neutral, and just focus on finding that core engagement. Breathing in, full big breath. So that might be what you're working with today. That might be your core practice, is just learning how to brace without flattening your back to the floor. If that's going pretty well for you and you want to make this a little trickier today, we're going to see if we can hold that brace while we continue to breathe. So at least for me, I feel like in order to keep my core braced, I need to let my ribs expand a little more fully when I breathe in. So I feel that expansion out to the sides. I still feel my core engaged even on the breath in. And then when I breathe out, my core is still engaged and I feel my ribs kind of contract a little bit. Breathing in, ribs expand, core is engaged. Breathing out, ribs come closer together, but my core is still engaged. Okay, and then if that feels great, you can start to bring some movement in. So we still have our core engaged, we're still breathing, letting the ribs expand. Then we'll just start to march our feet, picking one foot up, putting it down, pick the other foot up and put it down. And then we're going to check in here again, everything from our hips to our shoulders. So those areas should be staying pretty steady. So our legs are moving. We've got some hip movement, hip mobility going on, but the pelvis should not be rocking side to side. Our low belly or our low back should be staying neutral. Our belly should be engaged. Our ribs should be staying down. All right. And then if you want to make this harder, and it's completely your choice, you could try bringing your knees right up above your hips. We have about a 90-degree bend at the knee joint. We'll keep one foot up in the air, let the other foot tap down, and then come up and swap sides. Tap the foot down and come up. And again, do your check-ins. Make sure the pelvis isn't rocking and rolling. Make sure the core is engaged. Make sure your back isn't smushed to the floor. Make sure the ribs are staying steady. Good. Just a moment longer. And again, if you want to be just working with the breath and finding that engagement, that's fine. When you feel like you've done both sides the same number of times, we're going to go ahead and let both of our feet land again. Soften your belly for a moment. Let your arms land wherever they'd like. And then we're going to roll to one side to come up. So again, your arm can come overhead. Roll to your side. Use your arms for support as you peel yourself back up and away. All right, we're going to find our way to hands and knees now. And if your knees don't like being on a hard surface, you're welcome to bring a blanket in. So you could open your blanket up so it still has a fold, and then just bring that onto your surface if you want to. This is just to make the ground a little squishier for knees. And then come into our tabletops. We have our hips right above the knees and our shoulders right above our wrists. And then we're just going to shift our body weight back and forward. And as we do this, we're going to pay attention to what's happening in our low back. So at some point, as you shift back, your low back is going to want to round. And I'll show you what that looks like just so you understand. Low back rounding, rounding, rounding. So this is child's pose. We don't do this in scoliosis yoga. So we're not going for that right now. We're just keeping the spine neutral, shifting forward and back. Getting a feel for movement in the hips versus movement in the lumbar spine. getting a feel for movement in your shoulders versus movement in your thoracic spine. And again, this movement can be as big or as little as it needs to be here. All right, and then we're going to shift our hips back and pause. So hips are going to come maybe about halfway back to your shins. So our butt's staying up in the air on purpose. And then we're going to walk our hands as far forward as we can. And you might choose to bring some blocks in under your hands here. We're going to let our ears be right between our arms. This is our puppy pose. So this is different from child's pose. I like to think about having some suction cups under my hands. So my hands are suctioned in place. And then I'm reaching my sit bones back to lengthen the spine. Once again, settle in with your breath. Let the ribs expand as you breathe. Let your spine stay neutral. Get yourself nice and long. Maybe one more breath here, and then we'll find our way back to our tabletop. So you can walk your hands back in, bring your hips back forward again. Come back into this neutral position. You're going to slide the right foot back from here. Tuck your toes down, and then go ahead and shift your weight back a little bit. Maybe give yourself a little calf stretch. And depending on how mobile you are, you might not be feeling a stretch. Sometimes scoliosis folks are hypermobile and we don't feel a lot of sensation when stretching. So that doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. And then we'll come forward again. We're going to keep that same leg back. Lift it up from the ground a little bit. Go ahead and tap your toes down again. Pay attention to what happens in your low back. Now we're going to lift and tap back down again. So I'm going to place my hand on my low back just to demonstrate. You can keep both hands down. When you lift, be careful that your belly doesn't drop down towards the floor and that you're not kind of compressing into your lumbar back there. So there's no bonus points for going higher and turning this into a back bend. We're finding some core engagement, finding a neutral spine, and then limiting that movement just to the leg. Squeezing the glute, lifting the leg, and coming down. This next time we lift, let's go ahead and stay here. And then if you're up for an added challenge today, we're going to take the opposite arm forward. So if your right leg is back, left arm is going to come forward. It's going to come right along the ear here. Holding for a few moments. Come down if you need to. Keep breathing. And then let your hand land, and we're going to let our knee land. Take a nice refreshing breath there, a little breather before the other side. And then we'll slide the left foot back, let the toes land. Shift your weight back a little bit. Again, maybe you feel a stretch, maybe you don't. Either way is okay. And then we'll go ahead and come forward. Check in, find your neutral spine. We're going to do this little bit of lifting and lowering here with our leg. Up and down. Check in with what happens in the low back as you're moving your leg. Don't let your belly drop to the floor. Don't let the low back get compressed. Don't let the hip roll up as well. So sometimes people will lift their leg and their whole hip rolls up with them. Keep your hips nice and square. This next time we lift, we'll stay. Let your opposite arm reach forward if you're up for that today. So it's going to reach right along the ear. Good. Breathe. Find your balance. Find your stability. Find your strength. And then go ahead and let your hand come down and let your knee come on down. Have a nice big breath again. Good. We're going to find our way onto our side next. We're going to do a little side plank. So side plank, I often joke, is nobody's favorite position, but it's a really important one. So far we've worked on strength for the front of our core. We worked on strength for our back in our balancing table. We haven't yet worked on strength through our side body. So that's what we're going to work on. And I can show you a modification for this as well. So we have a variety of ways to make this easier or harder. One is to have a block involved. So an easier version here on the floor is going to be to have your knees bent, and you might cheat with your block here a little bit. So I'm going to put my block on the hard floor just so you can see it. So I'm going to bring my elbow down. I'm going to line up my elbow with my knees. You could also do this with your hand down. I'm going to find length in my spine so I'm not side bending. And then I'm going to lift my hips towards the sky. So something along these lines. If it's too hard for you to lift your hips up, you can use your block as a little cheat. You're going to press your hand into your block and help get yourself up. Okay, once we're here, I'm going to try to stack our shoulders, stack our hips, squeeze your bum. Try to keep equal length through both sides of your torso here. And then we'll come on down. And we're going to do the other side. So I'll show you a different option if that was just not happening for you here today. You can do a side plank at the wall instead. So you would bring your elbow or your hand onto the wall and then walk your feet sideways away from the wall. Again, we have a straight line through our body. So connecting all of our joints here. Make sure your head's not drifting forward. And we'll hold for a few breaths. And then we'll come on out. All right. So if you are still down on the floor, go ahead and come on up to stand to meet me. I'm going to find our mountain pose. So let's just make our way upright here for a moment. And then we're just going to kind of be in our body, kind of march in place, let your arms swing. Don't think too much about how you're moving or how you're positioned. Take a few big breaths. And then pause. And just kind of notice here. So take your gaze down towards your feet. Notice what direction they're pointing. My right foot's a little bit turned out at the moment. You might have 2 feet turned out. Maybe they're both pointing straight forward. Just kind of check in and notice what there is for a moment. And then we're going to bring our feet so both feet face completely forward. And then we're going to follow our way up our body here. Check in with your pelvis. Let your arms hang for a moment. So it's really common with scoliosis for us to have a pelvic shift. So if I don't do anything to correct my posture, my hips tend to live over towards the right side. So if that's you, if you have hips shifting to the side, push that foot down into the floor even more. Scoot your hips closer towards the midline. And this might need to be a baby scooch. So if you have a big hip shift and you're just getting used to doing this kind of movement, if you feel any kind of pain or discomfort in your back, just do a tiny bit, teeny tiny bit, and we'll kind of baby step our way there. And then you're going to stack your shoulders right above your hips. And then imagine that someone grabs just sort of one piece of hair and pulls it up towards the sky. So we're elongating through our spine. Nice, strong legs here. Press the feet down into the floor. Imagine you can pull your kneecaps up so that your quads are engaged. Squeeze your glutes. And then we're going to breathe in, sweep our arms out to the sides and up. And then exhale, let your hands come back down by the sides. Breathe in, sweep the arms out and up. Exhale, hands by the sides. Let's do that a few more times. And notice if you keep moving, if you're staying nice and stacked through your body, or if you tend to kind of drift into your normal patterns again. So you might find that you sort of drift back into that hip shift. Good. Let's do one more time here, really reaching with the fingers. And then bring the hands on down. All right. We're going to be sideways on our mat. We're going to step our feet nice and wide apart here. And then we're going to turn one foot out. So I'm going to turn my left foot first. So I'm working towards having my foot turned towards the short side of my mat. But if your hip doesn't love that, you're just going to turn your leg as much as your hip feels okay about and line up your knee with your toes. So if your toes aren't a whole 90 degrees out, that's okay. We're going to work for 2 straight legs here. Shoulders are stacked right above our hips to start. And then we're going to try to move just from our hips. So my left foot is turned out. I'm going to shift my hips towards my right foot and kind of lean sideways, but keep length through both sides of the waist. Okay, this is our triangle pose. We're only going to go as far as we can with the mobility of our hips. So a lot of times, maybe in traditional yoga, we try to get somewhere, so maybe to a block or to the floor. And so people end up side bending through the waist to get there. And that's not great if you have scoliosis, and it might not feel great either with some other back problems. So find that length through your spine. You can keep your hands right on your hips if you want to, or you can make that more classic triangle shape, bringing one arm down and the other up. But check in again with your back. What's happening? Keeping things as neutral as you can. Good. And then we'll let our hands come to our hips. Go ahead and bend your front knee and draw your torso upright. And then we're going to swap sides. I'm going to let my right toes turn out 90 degrees or however far your hip's going to let them go. 2 straight legs, shoulders stacked above the hips. Scooch the hips towards the left, lengthen towards the right. Check in here. Make sure both sides of the waist are equally long. Go only as far as you can with that hip movement. So it might be an even smaller movement than this. That's perfectly okay. And then maybe you bring your arms into that sort of more classic triangle shape. Good. Sometimes going not quite so far actually takes more effort. So we have to use our core to hold us here when we're not just side bending to get lower. Good. And then come on back up to center. And turn your feet towards the long side of your mat. We're going to hinge from our hips. So no rounding through the back. Hinge from your hips. Fold forward. Nice long spine. So if I turn sideways, so you can see that a little more easily. Hinge from the hips. Nice long spine. It's like I'm making a tabletop with my back here. Okay, so nice flat back as opposed to rounding. Doesn't matter if we get somewhere. Doesn't matter if you can reach the floor if your back is rounding. Keep your spine long. Let your neck just be an extension of the spine. We'll hold for one more breath. And then if you need to bend your knees a little, go ahead. We're going to come upright again. And then go ahead and step the feet closer together. You can heel toe them together if you want to. Find your way back. All right. We're going to practice with a little bit of balance. We're going to do our tree pose. If you're not sure about your balance, you're welcome to hold on to something. So you might have a chair handy, or you can turn sideways and hold on to a wall if you'd like to. So again, we're going to stack ourselves up into our mountain pose. Get our feet facing forward. Make sure your pelvis isn't shifting to a side. Stack the shoulders right above the hips. And then shift your weight over onto one foot and draw the other knee straight up. See if you can keep your hips still centered here and keep your upper body right where it was. So we don't want to turn into a whole leaning upper body scenario. Okay, and then we're going to put that foot back down again. We'll eventually get to our tree. Okay, find your balance. Keep your hips centered. Draw your knee up. Make sure you're not leaning back or leaning sideways. Keep the spine neutral. And then we'll go ahead and bring that foot down. We're going to swap back over to our other leg. We're going to bring our knee up and then turn it out any amount and let your foot find somewhere to land. Okay? Check in with your pelvis here again. So make sure you didn't flop off to the side. Keep that hip drawing in towards the midline. Check in with your waist. Keep equal length through both sides. If you have your balance, maybe you reach your arms back up overhead again. Lengthen. Good. And then we'll find our way out. And if you're feeling super wobbly through your ankles, just know that you're building strength that way. Now come on over to your other leg. We'll shift our weight, draw the knee up, turn the knee out any amount, find somewhere for it to land. Check in with your standing leg hip. Keep pulling it, so not flopping off. Pull it in towards the midline. Lengthen the spine up. Stack the shoulders above the hips. Maybe draw the arms overhead. Maybe one side is easier than the other. That's really normal. Good. And then let's go ahead and gently find our way back down. Plant both feet down to the ground. Take a breath. Excellent. We're going to find our way into a seated position in a chair. And I'm going to sit actually so my side is facing you. You could sit facing me. We're going to sit far enough forward in our chair that we're not touching the back of it. And we're going to sit nice and tall. So this is all a work in progress. Let me say that. I know that, when we have scoliosis, we have a rounding in our back. I definitely do as well. If you have hyperkyphosis, you might be more rounded forward. We're doing our best to get as close to neutral as we can. And it might not be perfect today. That's okay. We're going to sit tall. And then we're going to lean forward from our hips. Your hands can be anywhere. I'm just trying to get mine out of the picture here. And then you're going to come back up to center. And then you're going to lean back from the hips. And come back to center. So if I bring my arms down, leaning forward from the hips, come back to center, leaning back from the hips, and come back to center. We'll try this another few more times. This is another way of strengthening our core. What we're paying attention to here is that our movement is happening at the hip and not through the spine. So when I lean back, I want to make sure that I'm not popping my ribs forward. And when I lean forward, I want to make sure that I'm not rounding my back to get there. The spine is neutral, keeping long, reaching your head away from your tailbone, and just rocking forward and back on your sit bones. And then we'll find our way back to center. Good. I'm going to take a moment here. So you can close your eyes. You can lean back against your chair if you want to, or you could even come to lay down on your back again if you'd like to. Let your arms rest wherever they're comfortable. Either close the eyes or find a soft gaze. And just have a moment to check in. For winding down, just notice how you feel after movement. And try not to judge what you're feeling. Maybe you feel great. Maybe you feel invigorated. Maybe there are some parts in your body that are a little cranky. Sometimes that happens, especially if we haven't been moving for a while and we start asking our bodies to move. Or even if we have been moving and we're asking our bodies to move differently, sometimes we get some cranky spots for a moment. We always have to check in and decide if it feels safe or if we maybe feel like we overdid it. Take a moment here, just see how you're feeling. And then when you're ready, go ahead and open your eyes again. Well, thank you all for joining me here today. One of my next videos that I'm going to record will be something that's a little more specific to people who have scoliosis without a spinal fusion and without other additional spinal issues.
So there are definitely some things that we can do with our yoga practice for scoliosis to help bring curves towards the midline and to help derotate and work with all three dimensions of our scoliosis body. So that's what I hope to record next. If you want to make sure you don't miss that video, go ahead and subscribe. Thank you all. Have a lovely day.